In 2035's neon-drenched metropolis, Raven glitch Novak lives a double life. By day, she's a dazzling VR entertainer, captivating millions with her digital stunts. By night, she's a quiet activist fighting corporate exploitation. Her stable relationship with Oliver, her childhood sweetheart, offers comfort and security, but leaves her yearning for something more. Enter Zephyr Castellanos, a renowned VR artist whose stunning environmental installations mask an explosive secret. He's Cipher, a notorious eco-terrorist targeting corrupt corporations. When their paths collide during a midnight act of rebellion, the chemistry is instant and dangerous. As Raven and Zephyr's lives intertwine in both virtual and real worlds, they find themselves drawn into a passionate game of masks and secrets. Their growing attraction threatens everything they've built: her stable relationship, his carefully crafted identity, and both their positions in society. In a world where nothing is as it seems, can love survive between two people who can't show their true faces? Or will the masks they wear tear them apart? Chapter 1. The Glitch in the System. Raven's eyes fluttered open, the harsh glow of neon advertising seeping through the gaps in the worn blinds. She stretched, her hand brushing against the cool, empty space beside her. Oliver had already left for work, as usual. With a sigh, she swung her legs over the side of the bed, her toes sinking into the threadbare carpet. The mirror greeted her with a reflection she barely recognized anymore. Plain, disheveled, a far cry from the vibrant persona she embodied online. Raven ran a hand through her tangled hair, grimacing at the faded pink streaks. She'd have to touch those up before tonight's stream. As she shuffled into the kitchen, the coffee maker beeped to life, programmed by Oliver's meticulous hand. A note on the fridge caught her eye.
Made you breakfast. It's in the stasis box. Don't forget we have dinner with my parents tonight. Love you, Ollie.
Raven's stomach churned, not from hunger, but from a gnawing emptiness that food couldn't fill. She retrieved the perfectly portioned meal from the stasis box: egg white omelet, whole grain toast, and a precisely measured serving of fruit. Healthy, balanced, boring. As she chewed mechanically, Raven's gaze drifted to the window. The sprawling megacity stretched out before her, a labyrinth of gleaming skyscrapers and crumbling tenements. Neon advertisements flickered across building facades, their garish colors bleeding into the perpetual smog that hung low over the city. Magnetic trains snaked between the towers, carrying countless souls to jobs they likely hated. Her fork scraped against the plate, the sound grating in the silence of the apartment. How many mornings had she sat here, eating the same breakfast, staring at the same view? She could predict, down to the minute, when Mrs. Chen from next door would shuffle past their door for her morning walk. In 3 minutes, the garbage collection drones would whir by the window. At precisely 9:15, the building's ancient climate control system would groan to life. Somewhere out there, beyond the smog and the neon, beyond the rigid schedule of her days, lay a world of possibilities, of passion, of purpose. She'd seen glimpses of it in her nighttime excursions, in the adrenaline rush of covert activism. But those moments were fleeting, stolen between the cracks of her carefully constructed life. Raven's eyes fell to the framed holophoto on the wall, her and Oliver at Niagara Falls, one of the few natural wonders still accessible to the public. His arm was around her, both of them smiling. She remembered feeling happy that day, genuinely happy. When had that changed? When had his touch started to feel less like comfort and more like a shackle? But not here, not in this apartment, with its sensible furniture and carefully curated memories. The soft beige walls, the ergonomic chairs, the air purifier humming in the corner. Everything screamed stability, safety, stagnation. The bookshelf was neatly organized, half filled with Oliver's technical manuals, the other half with the classics Raven had studied in college but rarely touched now. Even their shared digital photo frame cycled through the same images, day after day, a loop of a life that felt increasingly foreign to her. Not in this life she shared with Oliver, safe and secure and suffocating. She could map out their entire relationship in her mind, their first kiss by the holographic cherry blossom trees in Central Park, their decision to move in together after calculating the economic benefits, their weekly date nights at the VR cinema, always choosing the surprise me option, but somehow always ending up in predictable, inoffensive rom-coms. With breakfast finished, Raven slipped on her haptic suit, the familiar sensation of nanofabric hugging her curves. The suit was top of the line, a gift from Oliver for their last anniversary, practical, thoughtful, and utterly devoid of passion, much like their relationship had become. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the VR headset. In moments, she'd transform into Glitch, the daredevil performer who defied physics and imagination. Millions would watch, cheer, worship her digital avatar. In that world, she was free, unbound by the laws of physics or the expectations of society. She could soar between digital skyscrapers, dive into pixelated oceans, ignite virtual fireworks with a snap of her fingers. But even as she reached for that escape, a part of her knew it was just another cage, albeit a more colorful one. The adoration of millions couldn't fill the void in her heart, couldn't quench her thirst for real change, real impact. Millions would watch, cheer, worship her digital avatar. And yet none of them knew the woman behind the avatar, the one who lay awake at night, heart pounding, remembering the rush of spray painting corporate billboards, of hacking environmental control systems to give relief to the poorest sectors. The woman who dreamed of more than just virtual stunts, who yearned to leave a mark on the real world, not just a digital one. Her fingers brushed against a hidden compartment in her closet, where a nondescript black outfit lay folded. The clothes of a shadow, of a woman who slipped through the cracks of society to fight injustice. A woman Oliver had never met. The haptic suit suddenly felt too tight, constricting. Raven took a deep breath, pushing the thoughts away. She had a show to put on, a persona to maintain. A life to pretend was enough.
Initiating login sequence.
She murmured.
Glitch. Online.
The real world faded away, replaced by a kaleidoscope of light and color. Raven felt the familiar rush as her consciousness merged with her digital self. Here, she was powerful. Here, she was free. As her eyes adjusted to the dazzling virtual landscape, Glitch materialized on a platform suspended high above a sprawling digital metropolis. Her avatar, a lithe figure with iridescent skin and hair that shifted colors like an oil slick, stretched languidly. Millions of usernames floated in her peripheral vision, her audience eagerly awaiting the show.
Ready for some chaos?
Glitch's voice rang out, amplified across the virtual space. The response was immediate, a deafening roar of approval that sent vibrations through the digital realm. With a mischievous grin, Glitch leapt from the platform, plummeting towards the city below. The wind rushed past her, pixels blurring into streaks of light. At the last possible second, she snapped her fingers and reality glitched. Gravity reversed, sending her soaring back up, past the gasping audience, into the stratosphere. But Glitch was just getting started. As she reached the apex of her ascent, she spread her arms wide. The sky fractured like a broken mirror, each shard reflecting a different world. With a laugh, she dove through one of the fragments. Suddenly, she was surfing on a wave of pure data, binary code forming the crest beneath her feet. The audience followed, their avatars transforming into schools of glittering fish, swimming alongside her. Glitch wove between towering firewalls and spiraling data streams, her movements a dance of defiance against the laws of this digital universe. With another snap of her fingers, the ocean of data exploded into a nebula of swirling colors. Glitch pirouetted through the cosmic spectacle, her body leaving trails of stardust. She reached out, plucking virtual strings that reverberated through the entire simulation. The music of the spheres, made visible and tangible. For the grand finale, Glitch clapped her hands together. The entire virtual world collapsed into a single point of light in her palms. The audience held their collective breath. Then, with a wink, she opened her hands, and the universe burst forth again, rearranged and reborn. As the applause and cheers of her virtual audience filled her ears, Glitch basked in the adoration, the sheer exhilaration of bending reality to her will. Yet, As the adrenaline of the performance began to ebb, a small part of her wondered how long she could keep glitching between worlds before her system crashed entirely. The show ended, and as the last of her audience logged off, Glitch found herself alone in the vast digital expanse. She sighed, her avatar's shoulders slumping slightly. With a gesture, she pulled up the log-out menu.
Glitch, offline.
She murmured. The vibrant colors of the virtual world faded, replaced by the muted tones of her apartment. Raven removed the VR headset, blinking as her eyes readjusted to the dim light filtering through the blinds. The silence was deafening after the roar of the digital crowd. She glanced at the clock. 3 hours had passed in what felt like minutes. Soon, Oliver would be home, expecting dinner and conversation about their days. Raven's gaze drifted to the hidden compartment in her closet, where her activist gear lay concealed. Tonight, after Oliver fell asleep, Glitch would fade away, and a different kind of performance would begin. One without an audience, without applause, but with stakes higher than any virtual stunt could match. Raven stood, stretching her physical body, sore from the stillness of VR immersion. As she moved towards the kitchen to start dinner, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was still performing, still playing a role. Only now, the audience was an audience of one, and the show was her life with Oliver. Chapter 2. The Artist's Veil. The crowd's murmur faded as Zephyr Castellanos stepped onto the floating platform. His avatar, a tall figure with skin that shimmered like polished obsidian, raised a hand. Silence fell across the virtual gallery.
Welcome
Zeph's voice resonated, warm and rich.
to Echoes of Earth.
With a flourish, he waved his arm. The stark white walls of the gallery melted away, replaced by a vast, pristine coastline. Waves lapped at the shore, their rhythm perfectly synced with the attendees' breathing. The scent of salt and seaweed permeated the air, a testament to Zeph's mastery of sensory manipulation in VR.
We begin where I began.
He said softly, a hint of something deeper, almost painful in his tone.
A childhood paradise now lost to rising tides.
The scene shifted. Water levels rose rapidly, submerging the idyllic beach. Homes crumbled, trees toppled, and the landscape transformed into a haunting underwater graveyard. Gasps rippled through the audience. Zeph's avatar walked on the ocean floor, each step stirring up clouds of sand and memory. He bent down, picking up a child's faded toy robot. As he held it, the robot glitched, transforming into a schools of fish that swam through his fingers.
But life
He continued, his voice tight with controlled emotion.
always finds a way.
The seabed burst with color. Coral reefs sprouted from submerged buildings, exotic fish darted through sunken streets, and bioluminescent plants swayed in the current. It was beautiful, alien, and heartbreaking all at once.
The detail is extraordinary.
They marveled.
How do you capture such emotion in a digital space?
Zeph smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes.
I simply show the truth.
He said.
Our world is changing. I'm just bearing witness.
He guided the group through more transformations, each transition smoother and more breathtaking than the last. Lush forests gave way to sprawling urban jungles, the very air seeming to thicken as holographic smog rolled in. Zeph's avatar took a deep breath, and the audience felt their own lungs constrict in sympathy.
We often speak of progress,
Zeph mused, his voice a hypnotic blend of melancholy and wonder.
but at what cost?
With a graceful wave of his hand, he summoned a shimmering butterfly. It fluttered through the smog, leaving a trail of clean air in its wake. The crowd gasped in delight, reaching out to touch the magical creature. Zeph chuckled, his charm palpable even in the digital space.
Look, but don't touch. Much like our real environment, it's far easier to damage than to heal.
The butterfly dissolved into a shower of pixels that rained down, transforming the urban sprawl into an Arctic tundra. The sudden cold made several attendees shiver involuntarily, a testament to Zeph's mastery of sensory manipulation.
Now, ladies and gentlemen,
Zeph's eyes twinkled with mischief.
who's up for a little game?
Excitement rippled through the crowd. Zeph's exhibitions were legendary not just for their artistic merit, but for their interactivity,
Let's play a game of consequence.
he announced.
Every action has a reaction. Shape this world as you see fit, but remember, nature always responds.
The audience eagerly began to interact with the environment. One person melted a glacier, causing sea levels to rise. Another planted a forest, only to see it consumed by wildfires sparked by another's industrial complex. Zeph moved among them, offering witty commentary and thought-provoking questions, his charisma drawing people in and encouraging even the shyest attendees to participate. As the Arctic scene morphed into verdant plains under the collective actions of the group, Zeph's avatar climbed a hillside. He turned to the audience, arms spread wide, the sun behind him casting a halo around his form.
We are the architects of our future.
His voice rang out, passionate and commanding.
Every choice, every action, ripples out into the world. What kind of world do you want to build?
The plains shifted and churned under the weight of the audience's collective imagination. Futuristic eco-cities sprouted alongside rewilded forests. Solar farms glinted next to vertical gardens that stretched into the clouds. It was chaos and beauty, a digital ecosystem pulsing with possibility. Each scene was a masterpiece of artistic expression and technological prowess. Zeph's code sang, every pixel a note in a symphony of creation. Yet beneath the beauty lay a current of urgency, a silent scream that most of the awestruck viewers failed to hear. As the exhibition neared its end, Zeph brought them to a final city, not the gleaming metropolis of most VR experiences, but a place of stark contrasts. Soaring arcologies cast shadows over crumbling neighborhoods. Rivers of data flowed alongside rivers of waste.
And here we are.
Zeph said, his avatar's eyes scanning the horizon.
The world we've built.
He snapped his fingers, and the city came to life. Holographic citizens hurried along the streets, their faces a mix of joy, stress, hope, and despair. With the flair of a stage magician, Zeph plucked a glowing strand of data from the air.
Every story, every life interconnected.
He mused, weaving the strand between his fingers. It branched out, forming a web that encompassed the entire city.
One small change.
He plucked a single node, and the entire web shimmered, parts brightening while others dimmed. A child's laughter rang out as a neglected park bloomed to life. In the distance, a factory's lights flickered and went dark. The audience watched, mesmerized by the intricate dance of cause and effect. Zeph turned to the group, his eyes intense.
This is not just art,
he said, his voice low and fervent.
This is our reality. We shape it every day, with every choice. The question is, are we being intentional about the world we're creating?
The holographic city faded, leaving the audience in a simple white space. The contrast was jarring, and more than a few attendees blinked in disorientation. Zeph's avatar smiled, the intensity of the moment before replaced by warm charm.
Heavy stuff, I know.
He chuckled, running a hand through his virtual hair.
How about we lighten the mood? Who wants to try their hand at a little world building of their own?
The space erupted in excited chatter as Zeph began to guide volunteers through the basics of his VR creation tools. His patience seemed infinite, his encouragement genuine. He laughed at their mistakes, celebrated their victories, and wove each person's contribution into a collaborative digital tapestry. As the impromptu workshop wound down, Zeph stepped back to admire their collective creation.
Not bad for amateurs,
he teased, earning a round of laughter.
You see, we all have the power to create change. Sometimes all we need is the right tools and a little imagination. Questions?
Zeph asked, his tone light, betraying nothing. The audience erupted with praise and inquiries about his techniques, his inspiration, his next project. Zeph answered each with practiced charm, deflecting personal questions with self-deprecating humor. As the crowd began to disperse, a notification pinged in Zeph's private feed. His avatar's expression flickered for a moment. Concern? Excitement? It was gone too quickly to tell.
Thank you all for coming,
he said, warmth returning to his voice.
Remember, the future isn't set. We all have the power to shape it.
The gallery faded, leaving Zeph alone in a blank white space. He sighed, shoulders sagging as if under an invisible weight. With a gesture, he pulled up a secure comm link. A distorted voice spoke briefly, the words inaudible to anyone who might have been watching. Zeph nodded, his avatar dissolving into streams of code. In the physical world, Zephyr Castellanos opened his eyes. Gone was the charismatic artist. In his place sat a man with a flinty gaze and calloused hands that didn't belong to someone who only wielded digital brushes. He stood, stretching muscles stiff from hours of immobility. His movements were precise, efficient, at odds with the fluid grace of his digital self. Zeph's eyes swept across his luxurious apartment, lingering for a moment on a nondescript panel in the wall. A small, enigmatic smile played at the corners of his mouth.
Time to get to work.
He murmured. Without another glance at the VR setup, Zeph strode purposefully out of the room. The artist was going to work, but on what canvas, only he knew. Chapter 3. A Shocking Encounter. The neon-drenched streets of Neo-San Francisco pulsed with their usual frenetic energy, but in the shadow of the towering Omnicorp headquarters, a different kind of electricity crackled in the air. Raven, clad in a sleek, matte black outfit that seemed to absorb light, balanced precariously on a maintenance drone. Her fingers, steady despite the height, guided a can of smart paint across the building's gleaming surface. The provocative message slowly took shape. Omnicorp steals more than data. She allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. The paint, infused with nanites, would burrow into the building's smart surface, making it nearly impossible to remove without a complete renovation. It wasn't much in the grand scheme of things, but it was a start. 12 stories below and half a block away, a figure moved with purpose through the shadows. Cipher, his face obscured by a high-tech mesh that distorted his features, approached a nondescript utility box. His fingers danced across a hidden panel, bypassing security protocols with practiced ease.
Time to pull the plug on this data mining operation,
he murmured, voice distorted by his mask. Neither activist was aware of the other's presence, each focused intently on their mission. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As Cipher initiated his EMP, a brilliant blue pulse erupted from the utility box. It raced outward, washing over the corporate block in a wave of crackling energy. Lights flickered and died, security systems went haywire, and one maintenance drone, caught in the pulse, suddenly lost power. Raven's world tilted sickeningly as her perch began to drop. For a heart-stopping moment, she was in free fall, the wind whipping past her face as the ground rushed up to meet her. Then, with a whine of backup systems kicking in, the drone's emergency protocols activated. The fall slowed dramatically, the drone's built-in safety measures fighting against gravity. It began to drift downward like a leaf caught in a gentle breeze, swaying side to side with Raven still clinging to its frame. Cipher, already sprinting from the scene, skidded to a halt as he noticed the strange sight above him. A maintenance drone was floating down lazily, carrying what appeared to be a person. As the drone neared the ground, its erratic movements became more pronounced. Just 10 feet from the pavement, it gave a sudden lurch. Raven, caught off guard, lost her grip. With a yelp of surprise, she tumbled through the air. Cipher, reacting on instinct, dove forward. Years of parkour training kicked in as he positioned himself, bracing for impact. Raven crashed into him with an oof that knocked the wind out of both of them. The force sent them sprawling across the pavement in a tangle of limbs and curses. Raven, her fall broken but dignity bruised, found herself face to mesh with her unexpected savior.
What the hell was that?
She hissed, trying to extricate herself from the pile.
An EMP. This block was supposed to be clear. How did you...
Me?
Raven cut him off, her eyes narrowing behind her mask.
You're the one who just lit up the whole area like a Christmas tree. Do you have any idea what you've done?
Cipher hesitated, reassessing the situation.
I'm sorry. My intel showed this sector was empty. I had no idea anyone else was operating here.
Raven glanced up at the now useless drone drifting aimlessly above them.
Well, congratulations. You just fried my exit strategy.
And you've completely thrown off mine.
Cipher muttered, checking a sleek, high-tech watch on his wrist. His posture stiffened as he saw the time.
Damn it.
What now?
Raven asked, suddenly alert.
My extraction.
Cipher explained, frustration evident in his voice.
There's a maglev train that passes by in...
He checked his watch again.
2 minutes. I was supposed to be in position to board it while it slowed for the bend.
As if on cue, they heard the distant hum of an approaching train.
So, not only am I stranded, but you've missed your ride too? Fantastic.
Their exchange was interrupted by the screech of tires. Flashlights began to sweep the area, accompanied by the ominous whir of security drones powering up. Cipher's hand moved instinctively to Raven's arm, but he stopped short of grabbing her.
We need to move now.
For once, Raven didn't argue. They sprinted down the nearest alley, the sound of pursuit close behind. Raven's intimate knowledge of the back streets complemented Cipher's agility and parkour skills, allowing them to stay just ahead of their pursuers. As they ran, Cipher spoke between controlled breaths.
For what it's worth, that message you were painting, it was good work, important work.
Raven glanced at him, surprise momentarily replacing the annoyance in her eyes.
Thanks.
She managed.
Your EMP wasn't so bad either. Terrible timing, but impressive range.
They shared a brief look of mutual respect before focusing back on their escape.
This way.
Cipher panted, gesturing towards a fire escape.
I've got a...
No,
Raven cut him off, tugging him towards a dumpster.
in here.
You've got to be kidding.
The sound of boots on pavement grew closer. Raven shot him a look that could have melted steel.
In, now.
With a groan of disgust, Cipher complied. Raven climbed in after him, pulling the lid shut just as flashlight beams swept the alley. In the cramped, malodorous space, they held their breath. Cipher found himself uncomfortably aware of how close Raven was, her body pressed against his in the confined space. Despite the danger, despite the smell, he couldn't help but notice how her eyes glinted in the darkness, fierce and alive. Raven, for her part, was struck by the strange intimacy of the moment. Here she was, hiding in a dumpster with a man whose face she couldn't even see, whose actions had nearly gotten her killed, and yet, there was something about him. A spark of defiance, of passion, that resonated with her own.
This is cozy.
Cipher murmured, his distorted voice barely audible.
Shut up. This is your fault.
My fault. You're the one who chose a dumpster as a hiding spot.
Well, I didn't exactly have time to book a 5-star hotel thanks to your EMP.
A beam of light swept dangerously close to their hiding spot. They both held their breath, pressing further into the shadows. As the light passed, Cipher whispered,
So what's your story? Activist, anarchist, or just really into extreme corporate makeovers?
Raven snorted softly.
Wouldn't you like to know? Empty head. What about you? Professional party crasher?
I prefer electronic feng shui consultant.
Cipher quipped.
I help corporations achieve a more balanced energy flow, usually by shutting it all down.
Despite herself, Raven felt a smile tugging at her lips.
Cute. Do you always hide in dumpsters with strange women after a consultation?
Only the interesting ones.
Cipher shot back.
Though I have to say, your choice of meeting spots leaves something to be desired.
Hey, it's working, isn't it? We're not in cuffs.
True, Kai. I suppose I should thank you for this fragrant experience.
Their banter was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. They instinctively pressed closer together, barely daring to breathe.
We're down to... You know,
Cipher breathed, his mask inches from Raven's face.
under different circumstances, this could be considered a memorable first date.
Raven rolled her eyes, but there was a hint of amusement in her voice when she replied.
In your dreams, circuit breaker.
As the footsteps faded, they allowed themselves to relax slightly.
So,
Raven whispered.
any brilliant ideas for getting out of here? Mr. Electronic Feng Shui?
Cipher was quiet for a moment, thinking.
Actually, yes, but it's risky. How do you feel about improvised parkour?
Raven raised an eyebrow.
Color me intrigued. But if this plan involves me falling off anything else, I'm out.
No promises.
Cipher chuckled.
But I'll do my best to keep you grounded. Figuratively speaking, of course.
As they began to hash out the details of their escape plan, arguing over the best routes and tactics, a grudging respect began to form between them. Despite their initial clash, they found themselves impressed by each other's quick thinking and adaptability.
You know,
Raven admitted reluctantly.
for someone who nearly fried me, you're not entirely useless.
High praise indeed.
Cipher responded dryly.
And you're not bad yourself. For someone who treats dumpsters as luxury accommodations.
They shared a quiet laugh, the tension between them easing slightly. In that moment, surrounded by garbage and the threat of capture, an unlikely partnership was born. Finally, the sounds of pursuit faded. Cipher pushed open the dumpster lid, offering Raven a hand.
Ladies first.
Raven ignored his hand but graced him with a smirk as she climbed out.
Such a gentleman. Do you always take your dates dumpster diving?
Only the special ones.
Cipher shot back, his distorted voice somehow conveying a grin.
All right, Casanova. Let's see if your parkour skills match your wit.
With a final check to ensure the coast was clear, they emerged from their malodorous hiding spot. The pre-dawn air felt crisp after the stuffy confines of the dumpster. In the distance, they could hear the shouts of the security team, still searching methodically through the blocks. Cipher pointed to a fire escape on a nearby building.
There. We go up, then across the rooftops. The maglev track is 3 blocks north. If we time it right, we can catch the 5:15 maintenance train.
Raven nodded, already moving.
Lead the way, empty head.
They sprinted to the fire escape, Cipher boosting Raven up before leaping to catch the lowest rung himself. They ascended swiftly, the metallic clang of their footsteps muffled by the ambient noise of the awakening city. On the rooftop, Cipher paused, surveying their route.
Hope you're not afraid of heights,
he quipped.
Please, I was painting a skyscraper an hour ago.
Their banter was cut short by the whir of an approaching drone. Without a word, they both dove behind a large air conditioning unit. The drone passed overhead, its searchlight sweeping the rooftop. As soon as it was gone, Cipher was moving. He took a running start and leapt across the gap between buildings, rolling to absorb the impact as he landed. Raven followed suit, her movements equally fluid. They raced across the rooftop, vaulting over pipes and sliding under solar panels. At the next gap, wider than the first, Cipher hesitated for a split second.
Having second thoughts?
Raven teased. Cipher shook his head.
Just calculating. Here, I'll give you a boost.
He interlaced his fingers, creating a step. Raven took a few steps back, then ran forward. She stepped into Cipher's hands and he launched her across the gap. She sailed through the air, tucking into a roll as she landed on the other side. Cipher took a deep breath, then made the jump himself. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed he wouldn't make it. His feet hit the edge of the roof and he began to tilt backward. Raven's hand shot out, grabbing his arm and pulling him forward. They stumbled together, Cipher's momentum bringing them uncomfortably close.
Thanks,
Cipher breathed, his mask inches from Raven's face.
Now we're even,
she replied, a hint of a smile in her voice. A shout from below broke the moment. They were running again, leaping and vaulting across the urban landscape. Their movements synchronized, anticipating each other's actions as if they'd trained together for years. As they approached the maglev track, they could hear the hum of an approaching train. Cipher checked his watch.
Right on time. Ready for the grand finale?
Raven nodded, adrenaline coursing through her veins. They sprinted toward the edge of the roof, the train coming into view below them.
Now,
Cipher shouted. They leapt in unison, soaring through the air as the world seemed to slow around them. For a moment, they were suspended between sky and earth, the city spread out beneath them like a glittering circuit board. Then gravity took hold, and they plummeted toward the top of the moving train. They hit the roof with twin thuds, rolling to disperse the impact. As they came to a stop, breathless and exhilarated, they found themselves lying side by side, staring up at the lightening sky. Laughter bubbled up between them, born of relief, residual fear, and the sheer absurdity of their escape. As the train carried them away from danger, Cipher turned his head to look at Raven.
So same time next week?
Raven chuckled, shaking her head.
You wish, circuit breaker.
They lapsed into comfortable silence as the city sped by. Eventually, as they neared the outskirts, it was time to part ways. As they prepared to disembark from opposite sides of the slowing train, Cipher paused.
Hey.
He called over the wind.
It was interesting meeting you.
Raven nodded, a smile playing at her lips.
Likewise, EMPD head. Try not to blow up any more of my exit strategies, okay?
No promises.
Cipher replied with a chuckle. As they parted ways in the pre-dawn light, each disappearing into the shadows they called home, neither could shake the feeling that something had changed. In a world of digital smoke and mirrors, they had shared a moment of genuine connection, messy, uncomfortable, and utterly real. Raven, safely back in her apartment, found herself chuckling as she peeled off her gear.
EMPD head.
She murmured, shaking her head.
What an idiot.
But as she stepped into the shower, she couldn't quite wash away the memory of strong arms catching her, of sardonic quips exchanged in whispers, of the strange thrill of a shared escape. Across the city, Cipher collapsed onto his luxurious bed, still dressed in his stealth suit. His lips quirked in a tired smile as he recalled the fierce glint in his mysterious companion's eyes.
Falling for someone.
He mused, allowing sleep to claim him.
Now there's a dangerous idea.
Little did either of them know, their paths were destined to cross again, both in the shadows and in the light. The game was only just beginning. Chapter 4. Digital Masquerade. Raven stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, the harsh fluorescent light accentuating the dark circles under her eyes. Another day, another mind-numbing evening with Oliver, another night of donning her digital mask to escape. She sighed, running a hand through her faded pink hair. The sound of Oliver puttering around in the kitchen drifted through the apartment. He was probably preparing another one of his meticulously planned, perfectly balanced, utterly boring meals. Raven could predict the entire evening down to the minute. Dinner at 7, discussion about their days, or rather, Oliver talking about his day while she nodded. An episode of whatever safe, inoffensive show they were currently watching, and then bed by 10:30. Rinse and repeat. She loved Oliver, she really did. He was kind, stable, supportive. But lately, that stability felt more like a cage. Every sweet gesture, every thoughtful act, only served to remind her of the passion that was missing, the excitement she craved.
Raven, dinner's almost ready.
Oliver called from the kitchen.
Coming!
She replied, plastering on a smile he couldn't see. As she turned to leave the bathroom, her eyes fell on her haptic suit, hidden away in the back of the closet. In a few hours, she'd slip it on and become Glitch, digital daredevil and VR sensation. The thought sent a thrill through her, a spark of excitement in her otherwise predictable life.
Showtime.
She muttered to herself, stepping out to face another evening of comfortable monotony. As the familiar sensation of nanofabric hugged her curves, Raven couldn't help but think back to the previous week's adventure. The mysterious Cipher, the dumpster hideout, the exhilarating rooftop escape. It all seemed like a dream now, lost in the monotony of her daily routine. She shook her head, dispelling the memories.
Focus, Raven. You've got a show to do.
With a deep breath, she initiated the login sequence.
Glitch. Online.
The drab bathroom faded away, replaced by a dazzling digital green room. Glitch stretched, her avatar's iridescent skin shimmering with anticipation. Tonight's show was going to be big. A gravity-defying dance number through a series of impossible Escher-like structures. She'd been practicing for weeks. As she made her final preparations, a notification pinged in her peripheral vision. A VIP had entered her pre-show meet-and-greet area. Curious, she hadn't been informed of any special guests tonight. Glitch materialized in the meet-and-greet space, a cosmic-themed lounge that seemed to float in the void of space. Her eyes immediately locked onto the newcomer, a tall, obsidian-skinned avatar with constellations swirling beneath its surface.
Well, swell. Well.
The stranger's voice was distorted, but oddly familiar.
Fancy meeting you here, Glitch.
Cipher. How did you...
Get in here?
Cipher finished, a grin evident in his voice.
Let's just say I have a way with digital locks. Nice place you've got here. Very spacious.
Stalking me now, empty head. I'm flattered, but I've got a show to put on.
Wouldn't dream of interfering with the great Glitch's performance. I'm just here to enjoy the show. Break a leg, figuratively, of course. We wouldn't want a repeat of last week's fall from grace.
Before Glitch could retort, Cipher's avatar dissolved into a shower of starlight, leaving her alone in the lounge. The show went off without a hitch, Glitch's avatar defying physics and imagination as she danced through impossible geometries. Throughout the performance, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, not by her usual audience, but by a pair of eyes that seemed to see through her digital facade. As the final applause faded and Glitch retreated to her private white space staging area, she noticed something out of place. A small black cube sat innocuously on a virtual table. Curious, she tapped it. The cube unfolded like origami, revealing a holographic invitation.
You are cordially invited to the Zephyr Castellanos VR art exhibition. reflections in the digital mirror. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. VST, Virtual Standard Time. Dress code, your truest self.
Glitch frowned. How had this gotten here? And why did the name Zephyr Castellanos sound vaguely familiar? The next evening, Glitch found herself in a vast, ethereal gallery space. Abstract sculptures of light and shadow populated the room, each accompanied by a small floating orb. As she approached one, a melodic voice emanated from it. Zephyr's pre-recorded message explaining his work.
An exploration of duality.
The orb was saying,
The personas we craft in the digital realm versus our true selves.
Glitch was impressed despite herself. The art was provocative, challenging, a far cry from the usual vapid VR installations she'd seen.
Deep stuff.
A familiar distorted voice said from behind her.
Really makes you think, doesn't it?
Glitch turned to find Cipher standing there, his avatar now dressed in a suit that seemed to be made of flowing binary code.
You clean up nice, circuit breaker?
Glitch quipped.
Here to make sure I don't fall off any virtual cliffs?
Cipher chuckled.
Just enjoying the art. And the company, of course. What do you think of the exhibition?
As they wandered through the gallery, Glitch found herself engrossed in conversation with Cipher. They debated the merits of each piece, joked about the more pretentious attendees, and shared their thoughts on the nature of identity in the digital age.
You know,
Cipher mused as they stood before a particularly striking holographic sculpture.
I can't help but wonder what the artist would think of us. Digital outlaws appreciating his work.
Speak for yourself, empty head. I'm a respected performer.
Arakigazar. Of course, of course.
Cipher nodded solemnly.
And I'm just a humble electronic feng shui consultant, remember?
They shared a laugh, the sound of their distorted voices blending in a strange harmony. As the night wore on, Glitch couldn't shake a nagging feeling. There was something about Cipher, the way he moved, the cadence of his speech, that felt tantalizingly familiar. But every time she thought she was close to placing it, the recognition slipped away like smoke through her fingers. They paused before a shimmering holographic sculpture that seemed to change shape depending on the viewer's perspective.
What do you see?
Cipher asked, his distorted voice soft with curiosity. Glitch tilted her head, studying the piece.
It's a bird. No, wait, it's a cage. Both at once, somehow.
Cipher nodded, impressed.
Freedom and confinement existing simultaneously. You've got a good eye, Glitcher.
Thanks.
She replied, a smile in her voice.
Though I'm starting to suspect you've got more than just a passing interest in art, empty head. Secret passion?
Cipher chuckled, the sound sending an unexpected warmth through Glitch.
Let's just say I appreciate beauty in all its forms.
He turned to face her, his avatar's cosmic eyes seeming to twinkle.
Some forms more than others.
Glitch felt a flutter in her chest, surprised by her own reaction. She covered it with a laugh.
Smooth talker. Do you use that line on all the girls you meet in dumpsters?
Only the ones who can keep up with me on rooftops, or...
Cipher shot back, his avatar giving an exaggerated bow. They moved on to the next piece, a swirling vortex of data that seemed to pull the viewer in. As they discussed its possible meanings, Glitch found herself drawn not just to the art, but to Cipher's insights. His observations were sharp, often unexpectedly poetic.
You know,
She said during a lull in their conversation.
for someone who crashes VR parties and blows up city blocks, you're surprisingly deep.
Cipher's avatar raised an eyebrow, an impressive feat of virtual engineering.
I contain multitudes.
He quipped, then more seriously.
There's always more than meets the eye, isn't there? In art, in people, in dashing VR performers who moonlight as graffiti artists.
Glitch felt her cheeks warm, glad that her avatar couldn't blush.
Touché. Though I prefer to think of it as urban redesign specialist.
They shared a laugh, the sound of their distorted voices blending in a strange, beautiful harmony. For a moment, Glitch forgot about the crowd around them, about the art, about everything except the enigmatic figure beside her.
Redonder. You know,
Cipher said, his voice taking on a playful tone.
I've been wondering something.
Oh, do tell.
That stunt you pulled in your show earlier. The triple backflip through the collapsing fractal. How did you stick that landing? I've been trying to figure it out all night.
Glitch grinned, pleased that he'd noticed the technical complexity of her performance.
A magician never reveals her secrets, Cipher, but
She leaned in conspiratorially.
If you're really curious, maybe I could give you a private demonstration sometime.
Cipher's avatar seemed to stand a little straighter.
I'd like that.
He said, his voice warm.
Though I hope you don't expect me to catch you if things go sideways. I think we established last week that I'm better at causing falls than preventing them.
Please.
Glitch scoffed, playfully shoving his avatar.
As if I'd trust my safety to someone who thinks EMPs are a party trick.
For his part, Cipher found himself constantly surprised by Glitch's insightful comments and quick wit. He'd come here with a purpose, to learn more about the mysterious woman he'd met on that rooftop. But now, he was simply enjoying her company, his original mission fading into the background. As they bantered, he caught himself studying the way her avatar moved, the expressiveness she managed to convey even through the digital mask. There was a grace to her, a vibrancy that went beyond mere pixels and code.
What?
Glitch asked, catching him staring. Cipher shook his head, chuckling softly.
Nothing. Just thinking that even if I searched every server on the net, I don't think I'd find anyone quite like you, Glitch, here.
Glitch felt her heart skip a beat, surprised by the sincerity in his voice.
Careful, Cipher.
She warned, but her tone was light.
Keep talking like that, and I might start to think you like me or something.
Would that be so bad?
Cipher asked, his voice soft. The question hung between them, loaded with possibilities neither was quite ready to explore. After a moment, Glitch cleared her throat.
Come on, empty head. There's still more art to see, and I want your take on that weird cube thing in the corner. I swear it's been watching me all night.
As they moved on, both Cipher and Glitch found themselves grappling with unexpected emotions. What had started as curiosity and mild antagonism was quickly evolving into something deeper, something neither of them had anticipated when they'd entered this digital gallery. As the exhibition came to a close, they found themselves on a virtual balcony overlooking a sea of swirling data streams.
So,
Glitch said, leaning against the railing.
same time next week? Another daring heist, perhaps? Or maybe just coffee next time. Less dumpster diving, more caffeine.
Cipher laughed.
Careful, Glitch. Someone might think you're getting attached.
In your dreams, empty head?
She shot back. But there was a softness in her voice that hadn't been there before. As they prepared to log off, neither could quite bring themselves to say goodbye. In the end, they simply nodded to each other, a silent acknowledgement of something. Something neither of them was quite ready to name. Back in her small apartment, Raven removed her haptic suit, her mind buzzing with thoughts of the evening. She couldn't remember the last time she'd enjoyed herself so much, online or off. Across the city, Zephyr Castellanos smiled to himself as he shut down his VR rig. The exhibition had been a success, but more importantly, he felt like he was finally getting to know the real Glitch, or at least, as real as one could be in the digital world. As they both drifted off to sleep, their dreams were filled with impossible architectures and the echo of distorted laughter. In the liminal space between waking and dreaming, a thought occurred to them both.
I think I'm in trouble.
Chapter 5. Crossroads of the Heart. The smell of pancakes wafted through the small apartment, rousing Raven from her sleep. She blinked groggily, surprised to find Oliver's side of the bed empty. A note on his pillow caught her eye.
Thought you could use a lie-in. Breakfast is waiting when you're ready. Love you. Oh.
A pang of guilt shot through Raven as she remembered her plans for later that day, a virtual coffee date with Cipher. She pushed the feeling aside and padded to the kitchen. Oliver stood at the stove, expertly flipping a pancake. He turned as she entered, his face lighting up with a warm smile.
Morning, sleepyhead. Just in time for the last batch.
Raven couldn't help but smile back. This was the Oliver she'd fallen in love with. Thoughtful, caring, always there with a kind gesture. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with maple syrup.
What's the occasion?
She asked, resting her chin on his shoulder. Oliver shrugged, a slight blush coloring his cheeks.
Do I need an occasion to spoil my girlfriend?
They ate breakfast together, the morning sunlight casting a warm glow across their small kitchen table. Oliver excitedly shared his plans for a community garden project he was spearheading at work.
So we're thinking of converting that old parking lot behind the building.
Oliver explained, his eyes lighting up.
The company's going green. and I convinced them that an employee garden would be perfect for team building and sustainability.
That's actually pretty cool. Are you thinking just vegetables or flowers too?
Both. And get this, we're planning to install smart irrigation systems. The whole garden will be connected to the building's environmental controls.
Oliver gestured with his fork, nearly dropping a piece of pancake.
We could even donate extra produce to the local food bank.
That could make a real difference.
Raven said, leaning forward. For a moment, she glimpsed the passionate, idealistic young man she'd fallen in love with.
Have you thought about...
Oh, and the best part
Oliver continued, his tone shifting to something more practical.
is that this project could lead to a promotion. Johnson in operations is retiring next year, and if this goes well.
And just like that, the spark faded. Oliver launched into a detailed analysis of his 5-year career plan, complete with projected salary increases and retirement contributions. The community garden transformed from a force for change into another rung on the corporate ladder.
With the extra income, we could finally start saving for a down payment on that condo in the better district.
He said, pulling out his tablet to show her the latest property listings he'd bookmarked.
Look, this one even has a designated VR room. Your streaming setup would fit perfectly.
Raven nodded automatically, pushing her remaining pancakes around her plate. The conversation had fallen back into its familiar groove. Work, savings, future plans, all carefully scheduled and budgeted. Even their dreams had spreadsheets now.
And I've been looking into better internet packages.
Oliver added, scrolling through his meticulously organized notes.
If we cut back on takeout and entertainment expenses for the next few months, we could upgrade to quantum fiber. That would really help with your VR performances.
Raven murmured, her earlier enthusiasm completely deflated. Even her digital career had become another item on Oliver's optimization checklist, another variable in his equations for a perfect, predictable life. As Oliver cleared the plates, he hesitated, then pulled a small box from his pocket.
I got you something.
Raven's heart skipped a beat. Was this? But when she opened the box, she found not a ring, but a delicate silver necklace with a small star pendant.
I know things have been a bit routine lately.
Oliver said, his voice soft.
I thought this might remind you that even in the everyday stuff, you're still my shining star.
Tears pricked at Raven's eyes as Oliver fastened the necklace around her neck. The metal felt cool against her skin, a physical reminder of the stable, comfortable life she shared with this kind man. So why did it suddenly feel so heavy? Hours later, Raven sat in her VR setup, fingers tracing the star pendant as she prepared to meet Cipher. The guilt she'd been suppressing all day rose up, threatening to choke her.
Get it together, Raven.
She muttered to herself.
It's just coffee. Virtual coffee at that. It doesn't mean anything.
But as she initiated the login sequence, she couldn't quite convince herself of that. The virtual cafe materialized around her, a cozy space with mismatched furniture and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Cipher was already there, his obsidian avatar sprawled across an overstuffed armchair with casual grace. One leg was hooked over the armrest, his other foot planted on the floor, and his head was propped lazily on his fist. The starlit patterns beneath his avatar's surface shifted like slow-moving constellations, and despite the mask of anonymity, his whole posture radiated a cocky self-assurance that made Glitch's heart skip a beat. Instead of the usual digital cafe menu, he'd customized a pot of coffee and 2 mugs to float between them.
Glitch,
He greeted her, his distorted voice warm.
I was starting to think you'd stood me up.
And miss the chance to see what passes for fashion in your world? Never.
She gestured at the floating coffee service.
Nice touch with the anti-grav pour.
Cipher chuckled, manipulating the pot to pour their coffee with an exaggerated flourish.
I figured if we're going to do coffee, let's do it with style. Though I have to admit I'm more interested in hearing your thoughts about last week's corporate takedown than discussing my coding skills.
My thoughts?
Glitch raised an eyebrow, surprised. Most people just wanted to talk about her performances or share their own stories.
Of course.
Cipher leaned forward, his avatar's starlit eyes focused intently on her.
That message you painted about Omnicorp stealing more than data. There was real insight there. What made you choose those words?
The question caught her off guard. She'd expected their coffee date to be light, flirty banter. Instead, Cipher seemed genuinely interested in understanding her perspective.
Well,
She began finding herself opening up despite her usual caution.
it's not just about the data mining. These corporations, they're stealing people's futures, their dreams. Did you know Omnicorp bought out entire neighborhoods in the lower city last month? Forced families who'd lived there for generations to relocate to the cramped housing blocks.
Cipher nodded, his avatar's surface rippling with what might have been anger.
They're doing the same thing across every major city, all in the name of urban renewal.
Exactly.
Glitch found herself gesturing animatedly, her coffee forgotten.
And the worst part is, they're not just taking physical space. They're colonizing our digital spaces too. Every VR world, every digital interaction, it's all being monitored, commodified, controlled.
Which is why we need to fight back.
Cipher said softly. His hand moved as if to reach for hers, then stopped, hovering over the table between them.
Not just individually, but together.
Their eyes met, and Glitch felt that familiar spark of connection, stronger than ever. It was almost scary how easily they fell into sync, how naturally they understood each other's thoughts and motivations.
I've been working on something.
Cipher continued, his voice taking on an excited edge.
A way to hit Omnicorp where it really hurts, not just their image. Their entire data collection infrastructure.
He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully.
I could use a partner. Someone with your skills, your perspective, your passion for justice.
Glitch's heart raced. This was exactly the kind of meaningful action she'd been yearning for.
What did you have in mind?
You know the new VR hub they're building in the entertainment district?
When she nodded, he continued.
It's not just for games and shows. They're planning to use it to harvest biometric data from every user who connects. Emotional responses, thought patterns, everything.
That's
Glitch felt sick.
invasive as hell.
And illegal.
Cipher added.
But only if someone could prove it.
His avatar's cosmic surface swirled with excitement.
Someone who could get in, document the evidence and make it public in a way they couldn't ignore.
A two-person job.
Glitch mused, already seeing how their skills would complement each other perfectly.
Exactly.
Cipher leaned back, his voice taking on a playful tone despite the serious subject.
Plus, I could use someone to catch me if I fall this time.
Glitch laughed, the sound coming easily despite her inner turmoil.
Oh, how the tables have turned, empty head.
They spent the next hour planning, their ideas flowing together seamlessly. It was exhilarating how quickly they built on each other's thoughts, how their different perspectives combined to create something greater than either could have conceived alone. As their virtual date drew to a close, Cipher grew uncharacteristically serious.
Glitch, there's something I should tell you about who I really am.
Glitch's heart raced. Was he finally going to reveal his true identity? But as she watched, Cipher seemed to struggle with himself, the words not quite making it past his digital lips.
It's okay.
She found herself saying, surprising them both.
We've all got our secrets, right? That's the beauty of this world. We can be whoever we want to be.
Cipher nodded, relief and something like regret mixing in his posture.
Right. Whoever we want to be.
As they said their goodbyes, promising to meet again soon, Glitch couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at a crossroads. On one path lay the safe, predictable life she shared with Oliver. On the other, the exciting, unknown future that Cipher represented. Back in the real world, Raven removed her haptic suit with shaking hands. She caught sight of herself in the mirror, the star necklace glinting in the low light. In that moment, she felt torn in two. The reliable, loving partner Oliver deserved, and the adventurous, passionate woman Cipher brought out in her. As she heard Oliver's key in the lock, signaling his return from work, Raven made a decision. She couldn't keep straddling these two worlds. Something had to give. But as Oliver called out a cheerful greeting, Raven realized with a sinking heart that she had no idea which path to choose. The crossroads loomed before her, and for the first time in her life, she was paralyzed by indecision. Chapter 6. Electric Touch. The maintenance shaft was barely wide enough for two people. Raven could feel the heat radiating from Cipher's body behind her as she worked on the security panel, his breath tickling the back of her neck. The physical proximity was distracting.
Almost got it?
He whispered, his unmodulated voice startlingly different from his digital one. She'd insisted they avoid any electronic voice distortion. Too risky with Omnicorp's detection systems.
Almost.
She murmured back, fingers dancing across the circuit board.
Though it'd be easier to concentrate if you weren't breathing down my neck.
Sorry, Mr. Cumber.
He chuckled softly but didn't move away.
Limited space options when you're trying to avoid security sensors.
Raven bit her lip, focusing on the task at hand rather than the solid warmth of his chest against her back. Their infiltration of Omnicorp's new VR hub had gone smoothly so far, almost too smoothly. Years of activism had taught her to be wary when things seemed easy. The security panel finally yielded with a soft click.
We're in.
Impressive.
Cipher murmured, and she could hear the smile in his voice.
Earth Tender. Ladies first.
Such a gentleman.
She pushed the panel open and slipped through, Cipher following close behind. The server room hummed with the sound of countless machines processing data. Rows of sleek black towers stretched into the darkness, their status lights blinking like stars. It would have been beautiful if they didn't know what these servers were really for.
The biometric collection nodes should be in the central processing unit,
Cipher said, moving with purpose through the rows.
Omnicorp wouldn't risk connecting them to the regular network.
They made their way deeper into the facility, moving in perfect sync. Raven marveled at how naturally they worked together, like they'd been doing this for years instead of meeting just weeks ago. A sudden noise made them both freeze. Cipher grabbed her arm, pulling her into a narrow space between server banks. They pressed against each other in the darkness as he fumbled at his belt with his free hand.
Scan incoming.
He breathed against her ear.
Hold still.
In one fluid motion, he pulled out what looked like a metallic cloth square and flicked it open. The fabric expanded instantly, forming a shimmering barrier around them. Raven found herself pressed even closer to him as the camo screen settled into place. The drone whirred closer, its red scanning beam sweeping methodically through the server room. Through the translucent screen, Raven could see the beam's reflection fragmenting and redirecting, creating false readings of empty space. The tech was impressive, but it wasn't perfect. They needed to remain absolutely still to avoid detection. Cipher's hand still rested on her arm, his thumb absently stroking small circles against her skin through the fabric of her stealth suit. Whether the gesture was meant to be comforting or was unconscious, Raven couldn't tell. Her heart hammered in her chest, though whether from the close call or their proximity, she couldn't tell either. The drone paused, its sensors probably detecting something slightly off about their hiding spot. Raven held her breath. She could feel Cipher's heart racing too, his chest pressed against her back. His other hand moved to her waist, steadying them both as the drone's scanning beam passed over their position once more. After what felt like an eternity, the drone moved on, continuing its patrol route. They waited for another 30 seconds, neither moving, barely breathing. The soft hum of the servers around them seemed to amplify the intimacy of their position.
Cernor is clear,
he whispered after a moment, but neither of them moved immediately. In the dim light filtering through the camo screen, Raven could make out the lower half of his face beneath his mask. Strong jaw, hint of stubble, lips curved in a slight smile.
We should.
She started.
Right.
He agreed, but his hand lingered on her arm for a moment longer before he pulled away. They found the central processing unit behind a reinforced glass wall. Cipher whistled low under his breath.
Now that's interesting. Look at the neural interface modules. They're not just collecting basic biometric data.
Raven studied the setup, her eyes widening.
They're scanning for emotional responses, memory patterns. This is way beyond what's legal, even with user consent.
Which they're not getting,
Cipher added grimly. He pulled out a specialized data tap.
Ready to make some corporate executives very nervous.
Working together, they began documenting everything. Raven found herself constantly aware of Cipher's movements, the way they seemed to anticipate each other's needs without speaking. When she needed a tool, it was already being handed to her. When he needed access to a higher port, she was already offering her linked hands as a step up.
Sir,
Cipher said as he worked on downloading the evidence.
We make a pretty good team.
Don't get cocky.
Raven replied, but she was smiling.
We're not out of here yet.
As if on cue, an alarm began to blare. Red warning lights bathed the server room in a crimson glow.
That's not good.
Cipher muttered, fingers flying over his device.
30 more seconds to complete the download.
We don't have 30 seconds.
Raven hissed, hearing the heavy footsteps of security forces approaching.
Trust me?
The question caught her off guard. She turned to look at him, finding his eyes intense behind his mask. Did she trust him? This man she'd met in a dumpster, whose real face she'd never seen, whose real name she didn't know?
Yes.
She said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Cipher nodded once, then returned to his work. Raven took up a defensive position, her body humming with tension as the footsteps grew closer.
Done.
Cipher announced just as the first security officer rounded the corner. What happened next was a blur of motion and adrenaline. They moved like dancers in a deadly ballet, covering each other's blind spots, anticipating each other's moves. When Raven stumbled, Cipher's hand was there to steady her. When he needed a distraction, she was already creating one. They burst out onto the roof, the cool night air a shock after the climate-controlled server room. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew closer.
Now what?
Raven gasped, looking at the sheer drop before them. Cipher's hand found hers, fingers intertwining.
Now we jump.
What?
But he was already moving, pulling her with him. They leapt from the roof just as security burst through the door. For a heart-stopping moment, they were in freefall. Then Cipher activated something on his belt, and a grappling line shot out, swinging them in a wide arc toward a neighboring building. They crashed through a holographic billboard, landing hard but safely on a maintenance platform. They lay there for a moment, breathing hard, hands still clasped together. Laughter bubbled up between them, the slightly hysterical kind that comes after cheating death.
That was...
Raven started.
Amazing?
Cipher suggested, turning his head to look at her.
insane.
She corrected, but she was grinning beneath her mask.
Completely insane.
They stayed like that for a moment longer than necessary, both seemingly reluctant to let go of each other's hands. Finally, Cipher sat up, pulling something from his pocket.
Here.
He said, pressing a small device into her palm.
The evidence. You should be the one to release it.
But this was your plan, your operation.
And your cause.
He said softly.
Your fight, I'm just...
He paused, seeming to struggle with something.
I'm just glad I could help.
There was something in his voice, something she couldn't quite place but that made her heart race. Before she could analyze it too closely, he was standing, offering her a hand up.
Same time next week?
He asked, his tone lighter now.
Though maybe something less likely to get us killed.
Raven took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. They ended up standing close, very close.
I thought you liked the excitement.
Oh, I do.
He murmured, and she could hear the smile in his voice.
But there are other kinds of excitement worth exploring.
The air between them crackled with possibility. For a moment, Raven thought he might reach for her mask, might finally bridge the gap between their secret and real lives. Instead, he stepped back, offering a small bow.
Urtuo. Until next time, partner.
Then he was gone, disappearing into the shadows with practiced ease. Raven stood there for a long moment, her hand still tingling where he'd held it, the weight of the data device reminding her of what they'd accomplished together. And if her heart was racing for reasons that had nothing to do with their daring escape, well, that was something she'd have to deal with later. Back in her apartment, Raven found herself staring at her reflection, the star necklace from Oliver catching the light. The evidence of Omnicorp's crime sat heavy in her hand, but heavier still was the realization that she was falling for a man whose real face she'd never seen. What scared her most was how right it felt, working with Cipher, how natural, how exciting and meaningful, and... Her phone buzzed. A text from Oliver asking if she wanted him to pick up dinner on his way home. Raven closed her eyes, guilt and longing warring in her chest. She had to make a choice soon. The only question was, did she have the courage to make the right one? Chapter 7, Echoes of the Heart. Raven woke to the familiar sounds of Oliver's morning routine. The shower running, the coffee maker humming, and the newsfeed's soft murmur.
After following the anonymous data leak, Omnicorp stocks plummeted as federal investigators launched a probe into illegal biometric data collection. Sources say the evidence reveals plans to harvest user data without consent through their new VR hub. Omnicorp CEO Marcus Chen has stepped down amid growing scandal.
She lay there, listening to the comfortable rhythm that had once felt like home, but now seemed to echo with something hollow. The star necklace on her nightstand caught the morning light. She hadn't worn it for 3 days. Oliver appeared in the doorway, already dressed for work.
Morning.
He said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes.
I made your favorite breakfast.
Thanks.
Raven replied, but didn't move to get up. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Oliver lingered, as if waiting for something more. When it didn't come, he shifted his weight, adjusting his perfectly pressed collar.
You've been quiet lately.
He said finally.
Is everything okay?
Raven thought of dumpsters and rooftop chases, of hands steadying her in the darkness of server rooms, of laughter shared in the face of danger.
Just tired.
She lied.
Big show tonight.
Right.
Oliver nodded, his fingers tapping against the doorframe.
The one you've been practicing for all week.
He paused.
I could try to leave work early. Watch the stream?
Once, that offer would have meant everything to her. Now it just made her chest tight.
Don't worry about it. You know how Johnson gets about project deadlines.
Another silence, another moment of distance growing between them.
Well, good luck with the show.
Oliver said finally, turning to leave. He stopped, looked back.
I love you, Rave.
The childhood nickname hit her like a physical blow.
Love you too.
She managed, the words feeling both true and somehow incomplete. After he left, Raven sat in the quiet apartment, surrounded by their shared life. The careful organization, the predictable patterns, the safe choices. Her eyes fell on a framed photo of them at a VR theme park, both smiling. That was 3 years ago. When had his arms around her started feeling less like an embrace and more like... She shook her head, pushing away the thought. Hours later, Glitch materialized in her pre-show space, a crystalline dome suspended high above a digital cityscape. She was adjusting her avatar's appearance when she felt a presence behind her.
The great Glitch preparing to dazzle her adoring public once again.
She turned to find Cipher's obsidian avatar lounging against a crystal pillar, starlight shifting beneath his surface. Despite herself, her heart quickened.
Stalking me again, empty head?
She asked, but there was no bite in her words.
Supporting a fellow artist.
He corrected, pushing off the pillar with fluid grace.
Though I have to admit, my motives aren't entirely altruistic.
Oh?
Glitch raised an eyebrow, trying to ignore the way her pulse jumped when he moved closer.
I was hoping.
He said, voice dropping to that tone that always seemed to bypass her defenses.
That after your performance you might join me for a walk. There's something I'd like to show you.
Their avatars stood close now, the space between them charged with possibility.
A walk?
She asked.
That's surprisingly normal for you.
Trust me.
He chuckled.
There's nothing normal about where we're going.
His hand lifted, almost touching her face before dropping away.
Break a leg out there, Glitch. I'll be watching.
He disappeared in his signature shower of starlight, leaving her with a racing heart and a growing certainty that she was in way over her head. The performance was one of her best, a gravity-defying dance through fractaling geometric patterns, each movement telling a story of rebellion against the expected, of breaking free from prescribed paths. If her avatar's movements held more yearning than usual, well, that was just artistic expression. Afterward, Cipher waited for her in a private transition space. Without a word, he held out his hand. After only a moment's hesitation, she took it. The world shifted around them, reforming into a coastal town at sunset. The sea stretched out before them, its waves catching the dying light. Everything was perfectly rendered, from the salt spray in the air to the weathered wood of the boardwalk beneath their feet.
Where are we?
Glitch asked softly, though something in her chest tightened with recognition. She'd seen this place before, in Zephyr's exhibition.
Home.
Cipher said quietly.
Or what's left of it.
In VR or IRL?
Cipher turned to her, his avatar's cosmic surface rippling with emotion. He tapped first his temple, then his chest.
Both, here. And here. Some things once lost exist most vividly in memory and dreams.
They walked along the boardwalk, past quaint shops and cozy homes. Everything was beautiful, pristine, and achingly empty.
The water took it all.
Cipher continued, his voice distant.
Every year the seas rose a little more. The corporation said they'd help, promised to build seawalls, install water management systems. But there was more profit in letting it flood, and forcing everyone to relocate to their new planned communities.
Glitch squeezed his hand, understanding now why he'd brought her here. This wasn't just a virtual space, it was a confession, a piece of himself he was sharing. They reached the end of the boardwalk where a small house stood facing the ocean. Through the windows, Glitch could see a family dinner scene frozen in time, parents and a young boy laughing over a meal.
Was this?
She started to ask.
Yes.
Cipher answered simply. They stood there in silence, watching the endless sunset paint the water gold. Glitch thought about the dumpster where they'd first really met, about the fear and excitement of that night, about how even then, something had clicked between them, like finding a piece of herself she hadn't known was missing.
Why did you bring me here?
She asked finally. Cipher turned to face her, his avatar's cosmic surface swirling with emotion.
Because you understand,
He said.
You don't just fight against the corporations for fun or profit. You do it because you know what they take from people, what they destroy.
The intensity in his voice made her shiver. He was right. She did understand. Just as she understood that this moment was about more than just sharing a memory.
Cipher.
She began, not sure what she was going to say, but he shook his head.
Not yet.
He said softly.
There's more I need to. I'm not ready to.
She nodded, squeezing his hand again. They stood together, watching the sun paint the lost town in shades of gold and shadow. Glitch found herself overwhelmed by the trust Cipher was showing her. This wasn't just a virtual space he'd created. It was memory made manifest, pain transformed into pixels, loss given digital life. The amount of work that must have gone into recreating every detail, every shadow, every weathered board of the boardwalk. This wasn't just showing her his past. It was letting her walk through his heart.
Thank you.
She whispered, the words feeling inadequate. Cipher's hand tightened on hers.
Thank you for understanding.
They stayed until the eternal sunset painted the world in amber and rose, neither wanting to be the first to let go. The peaceful moment was broken by a soft chime. Raven's IRL alert, warning her that Oliver would be home soon. Cipher's avatar tensed slightly, but his voice remained gentle.
Time to go?
Yeah.
Glitch replied, hating how small her voice sounded.
I need to...
I know.
His hand squeezed hers once more before letting go.
Thank you for walking with me today.
Glitch wanted to say something more, something meaningful about what he'd shared with her, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she just nodded, her avatar's surface flickering with emotion.
Glitch, offline.
She whispered. The beautiful lost town faded away, replaced by the familiar confines of her apartment. Raven removed her haptic suit with mechanical movements, trying to ignore how empty the real world felt after the emotional intimacy of their shared walk. She moved through her pre-dinner routine like a ghost, chopping vegetables, setting the table, all the while feeling the phantom warmth of Cipher's hand in hers. The sunset they'd shared seemed to have burned itself into her memory, making the apartment's artificial lighting feel harsh and cold in comparison. Raven sat curled in the window seat, her mind still walking those remembered streets. The door lock clicked, and Oliver's voice immediately filled the space.
You wouldn't believe the day I had.
He called out, dropping his bag and loosening his tie.
Johnson completely restructured the project timeline, which means we'll have to adjust all our scheduling matrices. I've already started reorganizing the workflow diagrams. Here, let me show you.
He pulled out his tablet, already swiping through spreadsheets, not noticing how Raven's shoulders had tensed at the intrusion into her thoughts.
And with the Omnicorp scandal, there's talk about implementing new data privacy protocols, which means extra training hours. But I'm thinking if we optimize our lunch breaks.
His voice washed over her like white noise, all their years together distilled into an endless stream of schedules and optimizations and carefully plotted futures. She thought of Cipher's recreation of his lost home, how even in its digital perfection, it had felt more real, more alive than this apartment with its carefully coordinated furniture and color-coded calendar.
Rave, are you listening?
She turned from the window.
Oh yes. Project timelines.
Oliver frowned, but instead of asking what was wrong, he launched into a detailed explanation of his new efficiency protocols. The evening passed in a blur of Oliver's voice, project metrics flowing into department restructuring into retirement fund adjustments. a steady stream of carefully planned futures that never once paused to ask about her day, her thoughts, her dreams. Later, lying awake in bed, Raven stared at the ceiling. Oliver's steady breathing beside her felt suddenly foreign, like a language she used to speak, but had somehow forgotten. Each inhale and exhale marked time in their carefully structured life, a metronome of comfortable monotony. On her nightstand, the star necklace caught the city's neon glow, its simple beauty a reminder of everything safe and stable in her life, everything she'd thought she wanted, everything that now felt like a beautifully crafted cage. But when she closed her eyes, all she could see was a sunset over a lost town. All she could feel was the phantom warmth of a hand in hers. She remembered the trust in Cipher's voice as he shared his past, the way he'd listened to her thoughts about the town as if her words were precious things. It terrified her, how real it had felt, how right. In the darkness, Raven touched her lips, remembering how close they'd stood, how badly she'd wanted to reach for his mask, to bridge the gap between their digital and physical lives. It was pulling her towards something terrifying and wonderful and real, a future unplotted, unmapped, alive with possibility. The question was, did she have the courage to reach for it?